I'm doing my presentation on Croatia, and like any country who lives by the Mediterranean, the diet is going to consist mostly of fish, fruits, olives, and whole grains. Croatia follows this diet closely. The food based dietary guidelines for Croatia are broken down by a four-tiered food pyramid. Although it hasn't been updated in the last 5 years, it still seems to prove to be effective. These guidelines were instilled by the Croatian Ministry of Health in collaboration with the Ministry of Education and other clinical hospitals throughout Croatia. Similar to our own food pyramid, there have fats, highly processed sugars are found at the top, so it means you want to consume less of those. Um, right above this is where you can find animal fats and sources of protein. The second level is where fruits and vegetables reside. Finally, at the bottom is where the population consumes the most food and puts the most focus on. This includes cereals and other beans. Like any food pyramid, important messages are emphasized. Some of the ones Croatians thought that were important were don't eat too much food, eat whole grain cereals, consume 5 or more servings of fruits and vegetables per day. Instead of saturated fats, incorporate such as olive oil or pumpkin seed oil. They put a lot of emphasis on breakfast being the most important meal of the day. Some of the agricultural practices is that most of the land is that was previously under social ownership has now been nationalized by the Croatian government and is now leased out to the farmers. The major crops of this region are sugar beets, corn, wheat, potatoes, barley, soybeans, so on. Other things that they produce are oats, rye, rice, beans, peas, and chicory. Since Croatia is so geographically diverse, this caused a civil strain, which subsequently led to a decline in production from the farmers. Varying from the lowland regions to the mountain regions, the government decided to step in and reform the whole economic system themselves. This included livestock as well. In Croatia, most of the government owns the land and then leases it to the farmers on a type of loan program. Free trade is still practiced, which only benefits the economy. A lot of Croatians participate in what they call part-time farming, which is how over 70% of the farms are functioning in present day. So they'll have their own regular daytime jobs, but they're part-time farmers as well, trying to provide for their family. Some of the health concerns are similar to the ones of the US. Like the rest of the world, the leading cause of death in Croatia is due to circulatory disease. They had a high number in poisoning, which I thought was interesting. Um, Croatia seems to be doing well while stressing the importance of vaccines and keeping the statistics down. This can be associated to healthy and general living conditions of the climate throughout Europe. The access to basic healthcare in Croatia is better than most, although less than 40% of reported healthcare workers in the country had only a secondary school education. Since the early 2000s, the infant mortality rate and life expectancy at birth have drastically improved. Croatia reported an almost 65% probability of dying between birth and age 1 per 1,000 live births, but improving to 11% in 2011. The World Health Organization has placed the monitoring and surveillance of obesity into 3 different age groups for Croatia. So it's 18 to 20 years and over, adolescents from 10 to 19 years old, and children aged 0 to 9. The Croatian men tend to be more overweight than the women. 24.4% of Croatian men were reported obese in comparison to 23.9% of the women. Over 20% of all children from ages 11 to 15 were reported overweight, which is concerning. The average amount of months infant were breastfed were well below 6, and it could be argued that the lack of breastfeeding has been associated with childhood obesity, leading into adulthood obesity. It's also linked through physical inactivity. Over 25% of Croatian children over the age of 15 reported not being engaged in any type of physical activity. As far as wealth of Croatia, it's currently listed as the 38th wealthiest country in the world with an annual average income of $14,000 per household. This equates to around $1,200 per month. Although this doesn't sound a lot in comparison to Monaco or the United States, they're doing a good job at improving these statistics. We have to remember that Croatia is a very young country, only getting established in 1990. Continuing into 2020, Croatian minimum wage has gone up. While things are improving, they still are kind of at the bottom sector in comparison to the rest of the countries in the European Union. Like any country, these vary differently from city to city. Tourist towns like Split or Dubrovnik generate more income, resulting in higher salaries for the economy. A lot of Croatians supplement their income with the aforementioned part-time farming, along with other means of employment. According to the World Bank, the GDP was valued at around 60.42 US billion dollars in 2019. They've stayed rather consistent throughout the years, with the exception of 2015 only coming in at just under 50 billion US dollars. Since 1990, the lowest amount ever recorded was 10.28 billion, and then the highest being 62.35 billion. Some of the things that Croatia could improve on is definitely their education system or lack of education. General practitioners throughout need to help improving communication and strategies throughout their practices. Since Croatia was recently founded in 1990, the government is still finding different ways to become socially, economically, and politically stable. With this comes healthcare reform. They had some recent wars in the 90s that are still showing some destruction in modern day, and this is reflected throughout the economy. Like our country, many Croatians struggle with healthcare costs, no matter the availability of healthcare. Croatia is divided up into 21 different countries, and each country has their own health center where the individual may choose his or her practitioner. Usually a GP is responsible for the entire family that has been chosen. But the thing that stuck out to me the most was it takes on average 40 or more years for postgraduate education and similar training for general medicine. To me, that seems way too long for schooling. Sadly, the number of practitioners have declined from 84 per 100,000 people to 63 since 2003, which is a problem. Some of the things I personally think Croatia could do to better benefit their country is to become more united. They kind of split into like the mountain region versus the sea region. It seems to put a huge division between these guys. They all rely on outside trade when their best resources could end up being from each other. Since it is such a new country, they could definitely take the time to learn from other countries who are more stable and better off in their education system.